Good afternoon and welcome to this regular meeting of the City of Eureka Community Oversight on Police Practices Board. I, Dino Novello, will be facilitating this meeting. So let's start out by reading the land acknowledgement. The land that Eureka rests on is known in the Wiyot language as Jirojiji. Past actions by local, state, and federal governments removed the Wiyot and other indigenous peoples from the land and threatened to destroy their cultural practices. The City of Eureka acknowledged the Wiyot community, their elders, both past and present, as well as future generations. This acknowledgement demonstrates the city's commitment to dismantle the ongoing legacies of settler colonialism. We will begin our meeting by taking roll. Executive Assistant Shannon Fazio, will you please call roll?
Board Member Torres. Board Member Giventer.
Present.
Board Member Pardoe.
Present.
Board Member Chair Bellini.
Present.
Board Member Ladika.
Here.
And Board Chair Novello.
Here. I would also like to introduce our staff that we have in attendance. We have City Manager Miles Slattery and Independent Auditor Teresa Magula. The next item on the agenda is the oath of office. I'd like to congratulate. What's that?
The pledge.
It's not on. It's later. Congratulations to the following board members who have been reappointed to serve another term. As I say your name, will you please rise, raise your right hand, and Executive Assistant will serve the oath of office. So James Ladika, Dr. Mark Pardoe, and myself.
So okay. I
Dino Novello.
do solemnly affirm that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States
Do solemnly affirm the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California
and the Constitution of the State of California
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the Constitution of the United States
that I will bear true faith to the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California
and the Constitution of the State of California
and the Charter of the City of Eureka,
and the Charter of the City of Eureka,
that I take this obligation freely without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion,
that I take this obligation really without any reservation,
and that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties upon which I'm about to enter.
and I will discharge the duties that I'm about to enter
Of Commissioner for the Citizens Oversight on Police Practices Board.
of board member of
Citizens Oversight on
Citizen
Police
Oversight.
Practices Board
Police
of the
Practice
City of
Board
Eureka.
of the City of Eureka.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. I can clap this at the end.
Thank you, Shannon. Also, it's with great pleasure I have the honor to administer the oath of office to our new board member, Alisha Watson. So, Alisha, if you could please come on up here, and we'll administer the oath of office. I'll try to read this fast. Just kidding.
I'll do worse than that.
Let's turn this on. So raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, Alisha Watson,
I, Alisha Watson,
do solemnly affirm
do solemnly affirm
that I will support and defend
that I will support and defend
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California
and the Constitution of the State of California
against all enemies,
against all enemies,
foreign and domestic,
foreign and domestic,
that I will bear true faith
that I will bear true faith
and allegiance to the Constitution
and allegiance to the Constitution
of the United States
of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California
and the Constitution of the State of California
and the Charter of the City of Eureka,
and the Charter of the City of Eureka,
that I take this obligation freely
that I take this obligation freely
without any mental reservation
without any mental reservation
or purpose of evasion,
or purpose of evasion,
and I will well and faithfully discharge
and I will well and faithfully discharge
the duties upon which
the duties upon which
I'm about to enter
I'm about to enter
in the capacity of board member of the Citizens
in the capacity of board member of the Citizens
Oversight on Police Practices
Oversight on Police Practices
Board of the City of Eureka.
Board of the City of Eureka.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Welcome to the team. All right. The next item is our Pledge of Allegiance. If you could please rise. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. The next item on our agenda is the approval of minutes. I'm hoping everyone has had the opportunity to review the minutes from our last meeting. Are there any changes that need to be made to the meeting minutes? I have one change on the second page on the top. My name is misspelled, my last name. So. Okay. Any other edits or changes that need to be made to our minutes? Then I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
I motion to approve the minutes.
Okay, I see Board Member Torres makes the motion. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Board Member Ladika motions to second. So all those who are in favor of this motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those against? Any abstain? Okay. Thank you. All right. The next item is the public comment. This is a time for members of the public to comment on items not listed on the agenda. Each speaker is limited to 3 minutes. Such time allotment or portion thereof shall not be transferred to other speakers. The public will be allowed to speak concurrently with the calling of an agenda item following the staff presentation of that time. Pursuant to the Brown Act, the COPP may not take action on an item that does not appear on the agenda. Do I have anyone in chamber who wish to comment? Seeing none, is there anybody on Zoom?
I see nobody on Zoom for public comment.
Okay, then we'll close public comment. Now for old business, we do not have any items. We do not have anything on the old business, so we'll move to the new business. So for the new business, we have complaints and investigations review log. So I would like to see if someone on the independent auditor group is willing to share on that. Is Teresa available? Okay.
Yes, I am here. Thank you. Sorry, we were just getting some muting and unmuting handled. Hi, good afternoon. It is wonderful to be here with you all. I do want to apologize. We intended to be in person, but Southern California wildfires sort of derailed our plans. And so we are here virtually with you this time with the hopes of being with you in person in our following next quarter meeting. I wanted to, as usual, go ahead and give you our report for the final quarter, quarter four of 2024. And essentially what we do, as you recall, but just for our new members' information and education, the independent police auditor reviews complaints and other internal administrative investigations that are conducted by the police department. And our goal in doing so is to ensure that these investigations are complete, objective, and thorough. And essentially what we're doing is we are looking to ensure that the department is handling complaints and administrative concerns in a way that's aligned not only with best practices along the state, but also with your community's expectations for its police department. And what we do regularly is meet with department leadership. It is traditionally the chief of police and the commanders who will inform us about the types of complaints and administrative issues that they are investigating. We have real-time engagement on what we believe the case might look like. The department then goes back and conducts an investigation. And every quarter, on a quarterly basis, we report out to your commission about the cases that have been investigated and closed. So the important feature here is that the cases that we're reporting on have already been completed. In other words, the actions that were taken and the findings that were made have already been made. So we're reporting to you after the fact, after these cases have already been closed. But with the knowledge that we've been engaged with the department in real time in investigation and in helping to advise on some of the best practices for these types of investigations throughout the state. In this quarter, we received and are reporting out on about 8 cases that were closed in the fourth quarter of 2024. And really the main takeaway that I want to share with you all before I get into the details of the cases themselves is that the department has continued to show growth in formal accountability systems for its department's employees. And what I mean by that is when we first started our engagement, and this was at the time that then Chief Jarvis was in charge of the department. Of course, it has since transitioned to Chief Stevens. We were informed that a lot of these corrective actions and interventions and counseling were happening in an informal way. So it's not that your department was not intervening and correcting potentially problematic activity. It was more so that these types of corrections and interventions were not formally documented. And 20, 30 years ago, that may have been acceptable. But in present day, what we really like to see and what the department is currently doing is formalizing these processes. So even when the department is faced with allegations of seemingly minor misconduct, so for example, an officer may have potentially violated some leave policy practices, taken sick time when that sick time was not the appropriate classification. Rather than handle that sort of informally and on the side, the department is now opening formal investigations and tracking the outcomes and the findings of those investigations. So why is this important? These are things that have been handled all along in a more informal way. And what we're seeing is that it allows the department to improve both its operational effectiveness as well as improve and correct any patterns of behavior that it might be seeing among its personnel and its employees. So it's both holistic in terms of operations, in terms of adjusting or clarifying where policy might not be clear for its employees, in terms of seeing areas where more systemic training might be required. And then it's also at the individual level. So understanding that perhaps there's some officers or employees who have chronic patterns of behavior that need a little more intervention and counseling and corrective action. We have, as I said, a number of cases in this period. And some of them, as we'll get into, are for issues and challenges that were identified internally. So as I mentioned, there's a case related to an officer's use of leave policy and what the appropriate type of leave policy should have been. And there are larger cases related to issues of potential discrimination and harassment.
Can
Yes,
can I
absolutely.
stop you for a second?
Yeah.
So before we get into the details regarding each case, the agenda item is just for the investigations log, and so I appreciate you sharing your the background. And so, but I just would like to see if the board has any questions regarding the investigation log report that you provided. So,
Perfect. Thank you for that clarification, Chair Novello.
is there any questions from the board regarding our investigation log? No. Is there any public comments here in chamber regarding our investigation log? Is there any public comment in Zoom regarding our investigation log?
I see no one on Zoom.
Okay, so I'll entertain a motion to accept the complaint and investigation log. Board member Giventer moves to approve. Is there a second?
I second that.
Board member Torres motions to seconds the motion. So all those who are in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Okay. Independent Police Auditor Magula. Okay, now we can continue to our fourth quarter review.
Perfect. Thank you for that. I'm sorry I skipped right over the whole item.
It's all right.
I got ahead of myself. Yeah, so what we've taken to doing, again, just for the information purpose of our new board member, our new commission member, excuse me, is that we typically go through the report. The report was published as part of the agenda packet, but we like to go through the report and I read the case summary for each case that we have reviewed and offer the opportunity to ask any questions related to that specific case or to the types or nature of investigative matters that particular case brings up. And so if that's appropriate and the desire of the commission today, I'll proceed with that same process if that's all right, Chair Novello.
Yes, please do.
All right. Excellent. Okay. So we have quite a few to get through. And again, it's a testament to the fact that the department is really regularly opening and investigating these in a formal way. Again, a commendable process improvement that we've seen since the start of our engagement. Also want to acknowledge that this is clearly a task that is adding workload to an already very understaffed and overworked agency. So we really do want to impress upon both the commission here and members of the public that your department is working to close these in a way that is timely and effective, while also balancing a lot of operational priorities. So truly kind of hats off to them for being able to manage and juggle this many cases in a quarter. The first case we have is dated 2307. 23 indicates that the incident underlying the complaint or administrative investigation occurred in the year 2023. So that's the only thing that number indicates. In this case, the department initiated an investigation of use of body-worn camera, discrimination, and harassment. During the course of the investigation, as they were interviewing the involved subject officers, the department noted additional concerns regarding the confidentiality of internal affairs investigations. EPD was able to sustain some limited allegations, but found that many could not be definitively proven or disproven. And when that happens, the final finding is not sustained. And so that means that there was insufficient evidence to either prove or disprove it, certainly. We found the investigation itself to be very thorough, but we also raise in our narrative a number of fairly unfortunate legal challenges that impacted the department's ability to ultimately issue formal discipline. So I'll take any questions that any board members may have related to this particular case.
Is there any questions for? Yes, Board Member Giventer.
I was confused about the comments that are in footnote number 5. Can you expand upon what happened there?
Sure. Yeah, I will to the ability, without providing too much information and not disclosing too many details to protect the officers involved. But essentially what happened was that, as we list in this footnote, there was a text thread that involved a number of employees. It involved some of the employees that were subject officers in this particular investigation, as well as an employee who was part of the peer support program. And there was, as happens in text threads, there was one text that said, hey, as your peer support program leader, I would like to invite you to some sessions related to this particular investigation. It is a function of the peer support program to provide, guidance and officer well-being, and in cases of administrative investigations, to ensure that officers are moving through the process in a way that they feel is appropriate, answer any questions, and check in on their well-being. Administrative investigations can take a toll on officers, and that peer support program is there to help support them. Later in that same text thread, okay, so we've got kind of a rolling text thread here. Later in that same text thread, 12 hours later to be precise, there was an invitation for the same group of individuals to get together at a local bar. And when these employees got together at the bar, they began to have conversation, as we note in our summary, about the administrative investigation that some of them were which some of them were the subject officers. Now, this, as we discuss, is questionably a violation of the notification that officers receive when they become subjects of an administrative investigation. They are not meant to discuss this administrative investigation outside of the confines of their own interview or with their legal representatives. Now, here's where the disconnect came. It's all in the same text thread. And so the employees thought, whether right or wrong, that this meetup was a peer support program session, and that peer support program sessions were appropriate to discuss these kinds of administrative issues. That is not the intention of the peer support program, but that text thread led them to believe that perhaps this was all one and the same. The peer support leader who invited them to the meetup later at the bar was pretty clear in his interview that he did not intend that to be the case. There was some time frame that had lapsed between one and the next invitation, and that they were two distinct pieces, and they were not intended to be one and the same. But there was certainly some confusion in what the text thread represented to each person who was a recipient of that text message. Did that help to clarify?
Yes, thank you. As I understand it, in your judgment, it's inappropriate to discuss a potential inquiry by the department outside of the confines of the police department?
Yeah, so here I'll give you a little bit of kind of what's happening at the state level. So the notification that is issued to officers, and this was fairly standard up until a very short time ago, reads that the officer is notified that they are the subject of an administrative investigation. That same notification goes on to say that the officer shall not discuss the details of that administrative investigation with anybody other than internal affairs, potentially their command staff, and any legal representative or peer representative that they choose to have as part of their rights as a police officer. So that's the notification that they each received and that they each signed. Now, in subsequent months, and this has come up kind of across the state in various agencies where we work, there have been challenges to the legality of this notification. So that there have been challenges now, including in this case, that notification may not actually hold water. And so that the notification itself is being challenged across the state as officers and their legal representatives are arguing that no, in fact, you can't prevent an officer from discussing an administrative investigation whenever he or she chooses to do so. So we're kind of at a crossroads right now, and there are a variety of challenges to that particular notification language, and we have yet to see the outcome. So it's an unsatisfactory answer, but at the time that the employees were the subjects of these complaints, they had been notified that they shall not discuss the investigation outside the confines of either internal affairs, their command staff, or any representative that they selected.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions? Yes, Board Member Ladika.
You can go and then I'll after you.
Hi, independent auditor. My question is might be better directed to Chief Stevens, but I guess we can go play it by ear here. So the core of this complaint or investigation was a mimicking of somebody that was pulled over who had an accent by the officers after the fact in their own vehicle and looking at the body-worn camera. And then the investigation basically didn't go anywhere because the timing ran out, so there was no discipline. Is there any process departmentally, even though there's no chance for discipline, is there still like an improvement process that can then take place after the fact, like coaching informally or something that maybe, even voluntarily would be ideal? That's the question.
Yeah, so I would certainly defer to Chief Stevens on that because it is a matter that's right under his jurisdiction and not mine.
Good afternoon, everyone. Yes, in this investigation, I think what we got the most out of when it comes to change of behavior is the fact that the investigation occurred and the interviews that had to happen, the conversations that happened, the impact it had on the department. And even though discipline couldn't be administered due to, we'll call it a loophole in the system, the impact it had on the employees, conversations I've had with them following the investigation, it had an impact on them. It's changed the behavior. And we've also changed policy in regards to body-worn cameras internally on the access they have to other people's videos. They have to have supervisor approval to access that through a supervisor to watch a video to make a connection to another case. So as of several months ago when we got the new cameras, officers can only view their own body-worn camera video. So it kind of tightens that up a little bit and cleans it up for us to be able to enforce better.
Thank you.
Board Member Torres?
I was just curious if you asked the department, because my impression from this when we talk about the three employees was that one of them is the one who was offended and said something. if that's the case, why would he need peer support for what? To remind him not to do that again? I'm curious because I don't read here. If that's the case, why would he need the same peer support as the two guys who were misbehaving?
Yeah, thank you for that question. And we're speaking about different officers altogether. So the employee who reported it, in my understanding of it, was not part of that particular peer support, quote unquote, peer support session at the time.
Thank you.
Board Member Giventer.
Just a quick request for Chief Stevens. I understand that the body-worn camera policy has been updated and revised. And if it has been, can we receive a copy of the current status of that policy?
So the actual body-worn camera policy is still being written. It was the system in which holds the body-worn camera videos that we put restrictions on. So when we replaced our system and our new cameras, we had the ability to set new restrictions for access to those videos. So there is an internal document that was put out advising of the changes that will be included in the new body-worn camera policy, but the policy itself isn't complete.
So the rules for police officers have not been changed?
The rule specific to what videos you have access to has been changed?
The actual use, turning on, turning off?
No,
when
other than the
activated?
direction that's been given throughout this entire process that we've been involved in these investigations. That's been changed, but it hasn't been written into a formal document that I can provide to you.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question. I was wondering if the independent police auditor or Chief Stevens could please describe the what is a peer support session? What does that consist of? And what are some examples of when that would be used?
If I may, Teresa.
Absolutely. Thank you.
So our peer support program is pretty robust. The general purpose of peer support is to provide assistance to our employees across the board. And that assistance comes in any form. It could be work-related, personal-related, life-related, finance-related. It doesn't matter what it is. They're trained to provide that assistance immediately and then know of the resources that we can refer our employees to. We're contracted with Restoration Family Services and First Responder Services. So we have a professional organization that we can forward them to for official counseling and things like that. Peer support is meant to deal with issues at the moment, maybe some things that don't rise to that level, and keep the employee well, but also give them an outlet to speak about issues they're having. So some of the sessions we have from a major incident, so we may have a critical incident kind of debrief where we'll have that. We have troubling calls that we have employees go on, whether it's a suicidal subject, it may be a traffic collision. It impacts them. And the idea behind peer support is not to allow those traumatic incidents to build upon each other, but rather deal with them along the way so you don't get that compounded effect to where the employee has got so much baggage that it takes off work time really and some serious counseling to break them back down, defrag their brain in a way that allows them to function to go back to do the job. So we're trying to limit that amount of impact of those traumatic incidents building by having people that trained that they can talk to and have that support system for them.
So it sounds like this is handled internally within the department, but then at times it could also be an outside agency could also be brought in to help support.
Absolutely. The operating director for Restoration First Responder Services helps oversee our wellness program, which includes our peer support program and team, and does all the training for them.
And is there any kind of documentation that occurs whenever that peer support happens internally to, just in case if a similar situation ever comes back? Yeah.
So generally to have a formalized peer support training or peer support session, it needs to be approved by the command staff. So they can have one-on-one meetings, they can meet to talk and things like that, but if they're going to sit down as a group to have a peer support session, that session needs to be approved because we need to pay the peer support employee to hold the session, and we would have more control over and can dictate where it's happening, help facilitate the meeting to happen. I don't generally get to know the employees involved unless I'm help setting it up based on the type of situation it is, things like that. So I know there are phone conversations, there are meetings that happen every single day in that peer support realm with our peer support members, with our employees. I don't have documentation of all those that happen because a lot of them are just, hey, you got 10 minutes to talk in an office, and they talk and that's it while they're on duty. Actual peer support structured meetings, sessions, those are approved by the command staff and allowed to happen.
And it sounds like they wouldn't happen in a bar like it was suggested here.
No, alcohol would not be involved. Any type of intoxicants don't work well when you're trying to deal with a peer support program or peer support meetings and sessions.
Okay. Thank you for the clarification.
Yep.
Any other questions by the board? Yes, Board Member Pardoe.
Question regarding the last paragraph. As a result of this case, EPD requested a dedicated legal advisor. I guess this may be directed to city manager. Do we have a dedicated legal advisor separate from the IPA? Is there a significant cost associated with this dedicated legal advisor, and how often would we anticipate using such a person?
So the city overall has a third-party provider for that. It's called IRMA, and when we have cases throughout the city, we utilize them. We also have another on-call legal advisor, Liebert Cassidy Whitmore, which a lot of the government agencies around here use. We've been in discussions more recently about a specific person being assigned to EPD from either LCW or IRMA, and so we'll be having those conversations. But we do have not only our city attorney, of course, but we have specific personnel-related insurance third party called IRMA, and I forget, it's IRMA, and I don't know what the acronym stands for, but that's who we utilize.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Board Member Giventer.
How often do you call upon a third party?
Very often, as soon as we have even a suspicion, even if it's not a formal complaint from a personnel related issue, we are contacting IRMA and getting their consultation early on. So whether it's EPD, community services, development services, whatever it may be, if there is something that is reported to either another fellow employee or a supervisor that could raise to the level of a complaint or an issue, that gets reported to IRMA immediately.
Board Member Torres, you had a question?
Yeah, I was just curious, wondering who decides the need for the peer support meeting, because it seems like, if you look at it simply, it's a bunch of dumbasses making fun of some people, unprofessional behavior. I don't see how that's peer support. We need peer support for your unprofessional behavior versus, you could have a conversation with them about their unprofessional behavior. So I'm just curious as to how that becomes a peer support recommendation versus we need to talk about your unprofessional behavior, making fun of the public.
I'm going to start off with I don't have dumbasses in my department. They're officers, they're human beings. But what happens is that these investigations take a toll on the employee. The toll is the fact they're put on an administrative investigation. They know they're being looked at, that they could suffer potential disciplinary actions up to and to include termination. This causes a stress in their life, causes a stress in their work life. And the peer support program is not built around whether or not your actions were legal, unlegal, unethical, what it is. It's built around the employee and providing benefits to the employee. Because no matter what happens in this investigation, if they are not terminated, they're still our employee, and we need to make sure that they are well taken care of, so they're still maybe in a better place next time they're on the street, maybe in a better place next time they have a circumstance where they find themselves questioning whether or not they should make fun of something. And that's what peer support's about. It's about the employee. It's about the employee wellness. And we're going to take care of our employees because they are our people.
Any other questions from the board regarding this case? Nope. Independent Police Auditor Magula, can you please
Yeah.
describe the next case, 24-1?
Yeah, before I jump on to the next one, I just wanted to echo Chief's sentiments related to the peer support program. This is something that is really now coming to law enforcement as something that's acceptable. And so I would like to echo that these types of investigations, the critical calls that officers are engaged in, they take a toll on an officer's mental health. And having the opportunity to speak with a peer or with a counselor related to decompression, to understanding, the circumstances the officer is facing, these are really important things. And so I want to be very cautious because for a long time, even still today, seeking help, in particular mental health help, has been a stigma for law enforcement. And I want to be very cautious when we're speaking about this, that this is something that is essential. It is something that is needed by law enforcement and that for a long time was stigmatized. And so, we really want to impress the need and the importance of these types of programs and commend EPD for structuring a program that has helped its department employees significantly over time. I'll move on to case 2401. That's the next one that we have here. In this one, EPD initiated an internal investigation regarding conduct unbecoming while on duty. There were allegations related to safety, reporting, and efficiency, and this rose to the level of a formal investigation. EPD was able to sustain 4 of the allegations and found that there was insufficient evidence for the 5th allegation, so that one was found to be not sustained. There was the appropriate discipline and counseling and retraining issued. In addition, there were some systemic changes around how training is occurring and how training needs to be approved through the chain of command. We found those to be appropriate. And overall, we thought that the investigation was thorough and fair, and that the findings were appropriate based on the nature of this investigation.
All right. Is there any questions from the board regarding case 24-1? Board Member Ladika.
Independent auditor, what would have happened if it was determined through the investigation that it wasn't actually training, and because there were some violations of the law that occurred during this, whatever this was? Yeah, that's all.
So in this case, it was actually determined that it wasn't quote unquote training, but that the officers were acting under the direction of a supervisor. And so because they were being directed to perform in a certain way, the department determined and we agreed that they were under the impression that it was all appropriate and a part of their duties that evening, responding to a supervisor. As to the hypothetical of whether this had been determined, it wasn't really training and they broke a bunch of laws, I think that the department would have framed the allegations differently. It would have been allegations against individual officers for misconduct related to unsafe driving, and that would have been handled in a different way. And those officers perhaps would have been most likely been held accountable for those, but it was not the direction that this particular one went.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the board? I see none. So can we move on to the next case? Case 24-4.
Perfect. In this one, it was a complaint from a member of the public. That member of the public alleged that officers stole his personal property while they were executing a search warrant. This was a preliminary investigation that the department conducted. There was allegations related to the code of conduct and criminal behavior. These were all found to be unfounded, which meant that the allegations did not occur. And in reviewing this particular case, the department again found some concerns with body-worn camera activation, namely that the policy as written did not explicitly say that body-worn cameras should remain active when officers were not engaged with members of the public. In this particular search warrant, there was no member of the public present, and so several officers deactivated their cameras to conduct the remaining execution of that search warrant. The department has since considered, as we've mentioned before, those additions to the body-worn camera policy, and has, I believe, issued a directive related to having those cameras on during the search warrant, regardless of whether an individual member of the public is present or not. We found the investigation and the outcomes to be appropriate and complete.
Do you have any questions from the board regarding this case? I see none. Oh, sorry, I didn't see. Board Member Ladika.
Hi, again, independent auditor. Just wondering, when somebody comes in to submit a complaint and the complaint involves potentially criminal activity, is there a difference in how the department handles that than like a complaint alleging like discourtesy or something?
So my understanding is that any complaint of misconduct, whether that be of kind of the nature of discourtesy, for example, versus criminal conduct, receives an administrative investigation. And for the purposes of determining whether the officer engaged in misconduct on an administrative level, you would want to complete that internal affairs investigation. If there are criminal activity that's involved, that would take a distinctly different track, as well as the administrative investigation. And so the department may wish to pursue that kind of at the criminal level, as it would with any other member of the public. This would be a member of the department. And we've certainly seen that in other agencies where we work, that those would happen concurrently.
Thank you.
Any other questions regarding this case? I see none. How about we move to case number 2406?
So this one is a department-initiated investigation. This is the one that I used in my example in my opening introduction. This was a potential violation of sick leave and light duty policy. So EPD framed allegations related to city policies and department policies around sick leave, light duty, notification of those leave types. And they conducted a very thorough investigation. It included interviewing the subject officers, various witness officers. The department found most of the allegations to be unfounded, which means that they did not occur, but several to be not sustained, which meant that these were not quite, there was insufficient evidence to prove them one way or the other. As I said, we found the investigation to be incredibly thorough. We found the findings to be appropriate and complete.
Okay. Any questions from the board regarding this case? I see none. Let's move to the next one, case 2416.
All right, and this is a complaint from a member of the public. That member of the public alleged that officers were unprofessional and that they stole his private property. This was the subject of a preliminary investigation. EPD framed allegations related to its code of conduct. That was related to discourtesy, theft, and unbecoming conduct. After reviewing body-worn camera footage and police reports, EPD was able to determine that these were all unfounded. But similarly, and one of the things that we commend the department for doing, they noted in reviewing body-worn camera that one officer had delayed activation of his body-worn camera. It's a minor modification, it's a minor delay of about 5 minutes from exiting his vehicle to reaching the complainant. But they took the appropriate intervention and remedial action there to correct that officer's behavior. So that was commendable. It was not the subject of the complaint initially, and it was something the department identified internally and addressed. We found that investigation to be appropriate and the outcomes to be fair and complete.
Any questions from the board regarding this case? Yes, Board Member Ladika.
I'm going to take another attempt at asking this question a little differently. So when this complainant came in and reported this, is he at that point, is the individual at that point given the option of doing it through the complaint process or doing it through like the legal process of saying that and filing a police report and saying my items were stolen?
Okay, I understand your question better. Thank you. This is a more concrete example for me. Thanks for that. So my understanding is that members of the public can frame complaints of the administrative kind. And I would defer to Chief Stevens on how they might handle.
I can take that.
Okay, City Manager.
So this happens in all of our departments as well as EPD. When a community member wants to what we call a claim or a complaint, they can file a claim with our city clerk. And so what they do is they fill out paperwork, file that claim. As a matter of fact, I just recently received one related to a cell phone being damaged in a process. And anyway, we get them all the time. And so that's the process. Once it goes to that and they want to file a claim, there's a form, they fill it out, it goes to our city clerk. We have another third party agency that addresses those claims. We take those claims, we give the background to it, and then they determine whether to reject it or accept the claim.
Chief Stevens?
And if I may, in this case too, we seized the quote unquote stolen item from the complainant. So it wasn't that we stole it. His complaint, while he uses the word stole his personal property, is that we illegally seized his item and was holding it as evidence in the crime that we believed he was committing. So I think that's the difference too, that how it was treated is that what he claimed was stolen was in our evidence room. We have police reports, watch the body worn camera. I don't have to look at it from a criminal standpoint of putting officers on leave or dealing with that issue to such a severe point because I have that much evidence to look at the beginning of this case particularly. So,
thank you.
I have a question for Chief Stevens before so it sounds like the equipment was taken from the property mainly for the investigation process, because I really question the officers. From my perspective, I see it as there's one individual making this noise with this loudspeaker. The individual was arrested. That removing the individual from the environment would have resolved the situation. I question why was the speaker even taken from the property at that point if you resolved the problem by removing the individual.
Sure. I believe it's in the summary. If not, the individual wasn't arrested. He was issued a citation for his actions. He barricaded himself in his residence and wouldn't come out knowing that he was going to go to jail for his actions. Therefore, by seizing the speaker, the cause of the noise complaint that we were making the arrest for prevented the neighborhood complaints from continuing and solved the problem for that day.
Okay. And it sounds like the speaker was given back to the individual, right?
I can't, it was made available to the individual when the case was done, but I don't know if he's picked it up or not. But just like all evidence we seize, once a case is adjudicated, they can make a request to receive their property back. And that was put in the letter that I sent to him at the end of the investigation as well.
Okay. Thank you for the clarification.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions regarding this case? No? Let's go to case 2417.
And so this is another public complaint. This member of the public alleged that officers did not properly investigate his allegations that his vehicle was stolen. He also alleged that officers were intoxicated or mentally ill, and that officers acted unprofessionally during the course of the call for service. EPD opened an investigation and framed allegations related to report writing, code of conduct, and intoxicants, all of which were unfounded given the available evidence. Here again, EPD noted that an officer failed to activate a body-worn camera, took remedial actions as it did in the last investigation, and we found the investigation and the outcomes to be appropriate and complete.
Okay. Any questions from the board regarding this case? I see none. Let's move to the next one. Case 2420.
Again, member of the public. This member of the public alleged that the police report that was drafted regarding his call for service was biased and that it lacked sufficient detail regarding the call for service. EPD reviewed those police reports, all the body-worn camera and radio communication of the call for service. They determined that all of the allegations as stated by the complainant were unfounded. We found that the investigation was thorough and that the findings were fair. We also, in this one, saw that there was some really commendable behavior on the part of the supervisor and the officer who responded to the scene. They really worked with the eventual complainant to find solutions to the situation that they were currently facing, so that this individual could safely leave the scene and return for his vehicle at another time. And so we wanted to highlight those actions on the part of the supervisor and the officer.
Okay. Thank you. Any questions from the board regarding case 2420? I see none. Go to case 2421.
All right, this is our last one, and thank you all for your careful attention during this presentation. In 2421, we have a member of the public who contacted EPD to report that he had observed an officer make a turn without using a turn signal. And EPD was quick to identify who that officer was, discuss the matter with the officer, provided some on-the-spot counseling on the importance of safe driving, and we found that investigation and that outcome to be sufficient and fair given the nature of the complaint.
Okay. Any questions regarding case 2421? Yes, Board Member Pardoe.
With this complaint, was there any video? Was there any further description? Was it was it an unsafe turn in front of someone? I would like, before I reply further, I'd just like to know what exactly the public provided to document this complaint, other than just stating the complaint.
Yeah. My understanding, based on the case file, was that the member of the public was able to provide the unit number, and so by having the unit number of the vehicle, EPD was able to determine the officer that was driving that unit. The member of the public merely stated that the officer did not use a turn signal. So there was no allegation that it was unsafe, that it was speeding, that it had cut someone off, et cetera, et cetera. It was simply, I was behind an officer and that officer did not use their turn signal when they turned right. So that was the nature of it.
I guess, independent police officer, auditor, my concern with this case is really it's a frivolous complaint, and that it got all the way to the level of the officer. To me, I think, to Chief Stevens' point earlier about the stress on the officers, to go to the officer and say, hey, the public said you didn't use your turn signal with no sort of danger to the public, no sort of documentation, video evidence, other than, providing a patrol car number. To me, as you said, I think, when I look at these cases today, obviously the first two, the lampooning of the public and, sort of a good idea for training that obviously went bad and was a costly mistake, I have no issues with those. I think I see the stress coming up when, the police officers are accused of stolen property twice. They're accused of being intoxicated. They're accused of being mentally ill. And then with those cases, they're further, in trouble because they haven't activated their body-worn camera. So, I see a lot of stresses on the police officer with some of these investigations. And this last one really, to me, is a frivolous investigation. And the fact that it went to the officer, I think, is, inappropriate. Now, if the public comes to us and says, hey, we've noticed this pattern and you're getting multiple complaints that officers aren't using their turn signals, well, then to me, it seems appropriate to sit the group of officers down and say, hey, you know what, remember, turn your turn signals when you're not racing to an emergency or something. But yeah, as you said, I think this is just adding additional stress to the officer, because anyone who works, there's nothing worse than being called to the table and saying, hey, you made a mistake. And to be said that, hey, you didn't turn your turn signal on, to me is just to reach the level of the IPA and the chief and, being advised on it. I have concerns. And then the medical procedure too, this poor officer went on leave, and the doctor didn't write a note in time. Well, I can certainly say as a physician, I many times in these workers' comp cases, it's just things take forever, and so for that officer to go through that, that process for being sick. And so I guess, how do we balance this? The first two cases, obviously, are significant cases that need training and appropriate counseling and repercussions. But these other ones, how do you balance the stress? And especially this last one really sort of irks me that, that it got to the level of the officer being chastised for not turning their turn signal on. So I guess the chief, I'd be interested in your input as well as the IPA on these additional stresses on the officers and how best to handle them.
Yes, Chief Stevens.
Yeah, Dr. Pardoe, I appreciate your caring for our officers' welfare. The one with the church, no, it wasn't. The employee was just asked about it. It was just brought to their attention. There's a lot of training that goes into me with my supervisors in that this came in on a formal complaint form. If it would came in on a phone call, it would have been handled probably differently than it would have on a formal complaint form. So I had this supervisor call the complainant back, do a preliminary inquiry, write it up just for the experience of that piece of it. The employee was brought into the loop early on. We knew there was going to be no discipline for the employee, given the amount of information we had. Honestly, I think she was probably on a call for service and made two right-hand turns, and just so happened the citizen was behind him and she was looking for somebody and didn't turn the turn signal on. But the other ones are mitigated in the fact that if I can show through the body-worn camera when I do the preliminary inquiry or when my commanders do the preliminary inquiry into the complaint that this is a frivolous complaint, that there is no substantial standing to this, then I won't notify the officer of the complaint. I will assign it to a supervisor. They'll write the preliminary inquiry up. I will communicate with the IPA on what my intentions are with this. When it is done and the IPA approves it, that there's no further investigation needed, then I will meet with the employees to let them know that a complaint had come in. This is what it was. We have already found it to be unfounded, which means it didn't happen. It was frivolous. Didn't want to pressure you with this. Didn't want to put this on you while you're working, because it may take us even 3 months, 4 months on something that is we know is unfounded to complete the paperwork, get it through the IPA, and get it back. So that's how I try to mitigate this. Is if I don't have to tell them to the very end, I will hold that information to the very end and only tell them the findings. If I know they're going to be unfounded, not sustained, there's going to be nothing of discipline come down for the officer. So that's how I try to do it from the inside when we can, to try to alleviate some of that burden upon them.
Yeah, and I think that's very important, as you said, especially on complaints that, are really, not really based in reality. And I think it's good to hear that the officers, it's at the end of the process, and that, because as you said, it should be very easy to prove some of these complaints are frivolous very quickly.
The only time I will note this, the only time I will tell them at the beginning is if it's a complainant that I know they will run into again. Yeah. Just to protect them, to let them know what actions the complainant has complained about, that I already know that they're unfounded. I've already seen the body camera, but be aware of this in the future. So I don't set them up for a second complaint, and they can respond differently if they have that complaint, or not respond at all based on the circumstances, have a supervisor or another officer handle a call until we get it resolved. So I will advise that if that's something I'm concerned about.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Yes, Board Member Giventer.
Questions for the auditor, perhaps also for Chief Stevens. In the introductory material for this report, OIR notes at the bottom of page 2 that they support the department developing what is called a comprehensive disaster preparedness plan. I'd just like to request a response with respect to the status of that recommendation.
Should just get a chair and stay up here. Thanks for asking that, actually. I have a very talented member of my department who is a retiree, who is working for us part-time, who's actively putting that plan together. So it's in multiple stages right now. So we have a more or less a policy that we've written, got a draft policy in place on how we'll respond to this internally. And remember, this is an EPD policy only, because we're going to be island to a certain extent when the next big major earthquake happens, we have to take care of the city from our standpoint. And we want to make sure that our employees, our operational systems and procedures are up to par when this happens, and everybody knows what to do, right? Because I may not be there, maybe in the middle of the night, and I have a sergeant and 3 officers on duty, and we have a tsunami hitting in 15 minutes. They got to be able to pull out a book and say, I got to do X, Y, and Z right now.
Right.
So internally, we've had command staff meetings with this employee that's putting this plan together for us. This is what he did in the military for the Department of Defense. And now he's reaching out to outside agencies to get their response plans, what resources they would have available for us. And internally, him and one of my commanders are working on that procedural piece now. So, the big right handle gets pulled. We have an earthquake. We know it's the big one, and we have 15 minutes. Anybody can pick up this book they're putting together and set up our command post, pull our resources back past 4th Street, and start the recall process and what that looks like. We're also trying to figure out ways of utilizing the assets that we have internally. We have great employees who have amazing skill sets. Our records division is not going to be open if we have an earthquake, a major earthquake. So how do I take those 5 individuals out of my records division and put them into a 24-hour operation so they can help with certain aspects of emergency preparedness, response, working out of the EOC as a liaison for me, training them and teaching them in different ways so that we have all of these different jobs covered internally within our department. No matter what your original job was, I have somebody who can cover that while we're working on this. So it's a work in progress. I talked to him today. He's actively reaching out to different department heads, city officials to see what the city's response is, how we mesh those together. So I'm eager to get it done because I don't think the next one's that far away. But at the same time, it's going to be done right to make sure that it works for us. But I will happily update you each quarter on that if you would like.
Good. I appreciate that very much. Second question that I have is related to the last sentence in the introductory stuff that's on page 3. The OIR group recommends that the COP board members attend the department's Critical Incident Review Board. I don't know what that is and what the nature of that recommendation is.
Yeah, so in the last COP board meeting, so we have to conduct a use of force review board for any officer-involved shooting or any major use of force that we have that causes significant injury or death to a member of our community. So we had the officer-involved shooting in November of 23. That report has been done and was reviewed by the COP board and the IPA. The DA's office has rendered their findings that no charges are going to be brought against the officers. And now we're in a position where we need to present, as a part of our policy, that shooting review board or shooting review report to a board to have it reviewed for different things. And last meeting I was here and I asked, I think it'd be a good idea to have a member of the COP board sit on that board for us or sit on that committee for us to see how that process works, be able to look at that report a little more in depth. I know Chair Bellini has sat on a couple through this whole process in the past. And so if somebody would be interested in sitting on that as a part of this, once I get that name, then I can schedule the rest of the members and happily get that shooting review board together and we can report out on the next meeting.
Good. I asked that to be a point of discussion for our board.
Well, actually, it is on our agenda on J1. So,
Okay.
but yeah, we'll talk about it as we continue on our meeting.
One more question. Last year, we had an opportunity to be briefed regarding the incident at Cal Poly. As I recall,
Board Member Giventer, right now we're reviewing our 4th quarter review. It sounds like you have is your question regarding our 4th quarter review report?
well, my question is regarding the recommendation for a mutual aid agreement. If that's more appropriate another time, I'll raise it then.
That's a quick answer. That'll be coming to the COP board likely in March, and then it'll be going to our council because they requested that as well.
Thank you, City Manager.
And the IPA and the EPD have been working together on that.
Okay. Any other questions regarding our 4th quarter review?
I have a comment that,
Yes.
with the exception of the outlier one, the first one you went over, these were all resolved within a year, and most of them actually within 4 months. So, congratulations to you guys for getting through these so quickly.
Any other questions or comments? I would also like to commend the OIR group. Thank you for your detailedness and your thoroughness in these cases, even though it seems like some of these cases are very small, but I really appreciate the detail that is included in here. So thank you. So
If I may quickly just circle back
yes.
to Board Member Pardoe's questions and comments. Definitely want to support what the chief mentioned around, ensuring that officer wellness maintain a priority, especially in some of these that might occur as frivolous. I think from kind of the best practices perspective, as auditors, we see two things related to that comment. One is that sometimes, and it wasn't necessarily the case in any of these that we investigated in the course of the last quarter, but sometimes what comes forward as a seeming frivolous small matter reveals larger systemic issues. It might reveal some needs for policy adjustments or training at the department level. And so informally investigating these, there's the opportunity to really have some comprehensive reviews of the department and the way that operations are handling certain types of calls for service or general operations in the department. So there's value to taking a look at some of the things that members of the public or employees are raising internally. I also find that, as I mentioned kind of at the start of my comments, the department was already issuing a lot of informal counseling and corrective action interventions when those were necessary. The formalization of that can seem like an onerous task, and it can seem like it is undue pressure on officers. But on the flip side, it does offer the opportunity to start tracking in a formal way. On the off chance that these are repeated patterns of behavior, the department is then able to take progressive disciplinary action in those cases. Whereas if they're kind of handled in the hallway or informally, there may not be the precedent to be able to issue progressive discipline for these employees that might require that. I'm not saying that's the case for the EPD employees that are in this particular quarter or for EPD employees generally. We're not really seeing that across the board. But certainly in other agencies, and it could come up in EPD at some point in time. The department's formalizing these processes allows for that progressive discipline and remedial action and corrective interventions to occur. And so that is why we really do press upon agencies to formalize these, even if they do seem like in the moment they're fairly minor or mundane issues that shouldn't burden the officer.
And Board Chair, I can add to that too. I was going to say something similar. It's no different in the rest of our departments. I can tell you that I would assume that between Public Works, Parks, and our other divisions that we receive a lot of calls about drivers that are driving city vehicles. We also receive a lot of calls about maintenance, not only from a personnel perspective that Teresa's speaking of, but from a liabilities perspective, documenting these things and having them investigated, demonstrating that you are doing your due diligence really helps out. We have another third party that's CIRA, that is our risk management, and deals with that. And there's a lot of things that we do are spending time documenting what we do to demonstrate that we are doing our due diligence, and it helps with not only from a personnel perspective, but also from a liability perspective.
Thank you for that information. Any other questions or comments regarding our fourth quarter review? I'd like to open it up to the public for public comment regarding this agenda item. Is there anybody in the chamber who would like to address the board? I see none. Anybody on Zoom who wish to comment on this agenda item?
I see no one on Zoom.
Thank you. I'll entertain a motion to accept this report from the board.
I motion that we accept.
Board member makes that motion. Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Board member Giventer seconded that motion. So all those in favor to accept this review, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, this passes. Next agenda item is our OIR group recommendation log. Independent Auditor Magula, can you please, for our new board member, can you please give us a summary of what this report entails? And
We need your help, Oz.
Thank you. I inadvertently muted my audio and was unable to unmute myself. Okay. Yes, thank you for that. We have our recommendations log, and this is a running tally of all of the recommendations that have been made in the course of our tenure with your city and with the department. Board Member Giventer, you brought up the question of the mutual aid agreement. This is one of the recommendations that's logged herein, and as mentioned by City Manager Slattery, that is a policy that is, we've been working on with the department, and it's nearly ready to be viewed by the board and by the City Council. Happy to answer any questions regarding other recommendations you all might have seen in the report here.
is there any questions regarding our the recommendations log? I see none. Is there any public comment in chambers who wish to comment on this? I see none. Is there anybody in Zoom who wishes? Wait. Hold on there. Anybody in Zoom who wishes to comment on this agenda item?
I see no one on Zoom.
Okay, thank you. Board Member Giventer.
Just quickly, what are the items regarding the body-worn camera policy that need to be updated?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for that question. And so there are several different updates to the body-worn camera policy. Some of them we highlighted in this last quarter's report. Those would be things like ensuring that the body-worn camera remains active during execution of search warrants, during times when police activity is happening, but a member of the public may not be present. And it would be also, for example, the questions around when activation should occur, and preventing delays in the activation. Essentially, what's happened with the body-worn camera policy is that the department was issuing kind of one-time directives related to how officers should use the body-worn camera. And those directives were never formally integrated into the policy. So you have kind of two different sets of working documents, and the department is now working to consolidate those so that anything that came around in a directive in the past 3 or 4 years is being consolidated into the formal policy. So officers are directed to do certain things with the body-worn camera that we've discussed, but these have not been codified in the policy itself. So it's simply aligning those documents. It's really more of a form issue than a substance issue, if that makes sense. And certainly we would like that to be completed in the near future.
Good, thank you.
All right. Any other questions, comments? All right. I'll entertain a motion to accept this report.
Motion to accept.
Board Member Torres motions to accept the report. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Second is Board Member Ladika. So all those who are in favor of this motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Next item on the agenda is the flock camera report. Independent Police Auditor Magula?
I'll start that one, Chair Board.
Okay, please do.
Thank you, Chair Novello, and good evening. I guess it is evening, late afternoon, board members. So this item, we took to council. What flock cameras are? They're automated license plate readers. The county currently has these same systems in place in the county. Other agencies within Humboldt County are looking at them too. But how we got here is it was an oversight by me. This is something that I should have brought to you prior to going to council. And when we went to council, that was one of the requests of staff, was to bring this to you guys prior to bringing it back to them. Along with that request, there were concerns raised about license plate readers. We had provided a draft policy. We have since strengthened that policy to hopefully address some of the topics and concerns that were brought up at the council meeting when we presented this. Some of those are around utilizing the data and the protection of the data. The main, I wouldn't say the main, but some of the priorities and the concerns were reproductive right issues and having other jurisdictions trying to solicit our data in order to address reproductive right issues, as well as community members that are undocumented and utilizing the information for that. And then there were also some concerns related to the storage of the data and our ability to control it. And so over the past, it's been at least 2 months, we've been working with Flock Camera as well as the IPA to review the policy, try to address these issues, and also worked with our city attorney to review the policy. And tonight, this evening, we have, I believe, Chief Stevens is going to kick us off with this and go over the policy. And obviously, we've consulted with the IPA on this, and as well as the Flock company as well, and Tariq Bright is here as well, and that will help out with some information. So have at it, Chief.
Good afternoon again. If I can ask, did anyone or has anyone watched the council meeting, or do I need to go through the entire, my spiel on why I think flock cameras would be a benefit and a force multiplier for the city of Eureka and EPD? I'd happily do it.
They look confused.
Yep. Okay. All right. Let's get after it then. So I'm here today to discuss the implementation of the stationary automated license plate readers and related software within the city. As the chief of police, I'm entrusted with the safety and security of our city, our citizens, and those that come to our city to enjoy everything it has to offer. In the day and age we currently live in, policing looks a lot different than it did 10, 15, even 20 years ago. Technology dominates our lives, from the appliances in our homes to computers in our workplaces to the cell phones, many computers we all carry with us every day. It isn't as simple as anymore to police a community to the best of our ability by just putting officers on the street, on foot, or have them posted at street corners. We simply can't be everywhere, and therefore there are many missed opportunities to solve crimes, recover property, and increase our community's safety through past policing practices. And don't get me wrong, we will always need officers on the street responding to calls and being proactive as time allows to change unwanted behaviors and to affect our quality of life and to intervene when the evil knocks at our door. Staffing is an issue at EPD, as it is across the state and honestly the country when it comes to our officer positions. Even if we were fully staffed, we can't rest on the idea that our success can only come from the men and women we put on the streets. So as the chief, how do I help my community, our officers, our detectives provide the highest level of service to our city? One way is through technology. We utilize different forms of technology daily that helps us keep up with those victimizing our community members. This is why I'm bringing this presentation to you tonight. The technology and services of the Flock LPR cameras will bring to our city and to our region a crime-fighting tool that will have direct and meaningful impacts on our ability to further police the city and bring further safety to our community members. We aim to leverage the use of the LPR technology for the good of the public, using it as a reactive measure to solve crimes and keep the community safe. There are two main objectives we hope to gain from the placement and implementation of this technology. The first is crime fighting, locating wanted persons, missing people, as well as abducted or kidnapped citizens and children, and other alerts such as silver alerts. We'll be able to recover a higher number of stolen vehicles and get them back to their owners quicker. We'll be able to locate vehicles associated with crimes committed in our region quicker. We can use the technology as an investigative tool to further investigations after a crime has been committed within our city, giving our investigators quicker leads and reduce the time a suspect is potentially on the loose to victimize others in our community. The second objective I believe will be accomplished is these cameras will provide or become a deterrent for criminal activity in our city, especially if you want to use a vehicle. Let's make it well known that the city has the technology and will use it to catch you if you decide to commit a crime with a vehicle in our city. This technology has the capability to really be a force multiplier for EPD. I've seen some of the comments online and heard the concerns brought forward about the technology, especially following the council meeting. I feel the presentation tonight by Flock, who will do a short presentation for you in a minute, will answer many of the questions and concerns as far as the technology goes, definitely what it is and what it isn't, and how it's been implemented all over the state of California and the U.S. You guys have a copy of the draft policy that will govern our use of the technology and how and when it will be shared with allied agency, as well as the permitted and impermissible uses. This policy was modified since the council meeting to more directly reflect what it will not be used for. The modifications and additions to the policy were drafted from Santa Cruz's LPR policy, one that our IPA worked with that agency on and has implemented in their city. We believe the policy is thorough, addresses concerns raised about the technology, and is strong enough to hold people accountable for any misuse of the technology. Privacy is the biggest concern probably felt by those with concerns about this technology. What can happen to your vehicle information? Because remember, that is all the system is collecting is a vehicle description and license plate, nothing else. The information is the property of EPD. We own it. The data is collected with cameras placed under our contract. It is not owned by Flock, and Flock can't access the data for their purposes. Data will only be stored in a secured cloud for 30 days, at which time it will be permanently deleted and cannot be recovered. Only EPD can determine who has access to the data. Therefore, Flock Safety cannot sell or share this data with third parties, and this will be a part of our contract with the company. EPD will share data with other law enforcement agencies in compliance with our policy, and they must meet the same requirements as an EPD inquiry to obtain the same data. I do want to end with some local information about Flock LPRs. The Humboldt County Sheriff's Department has implemented, like the city manager said, several cameras throughout the county. In roughly the 6 months at the time I'd done this presentation, the first time they'd already recovered 25 stolen vehicles and helped locate several high crime suspects that were driving vehicles that we knew the license plate for and were able to get them safely into custody. They also were instrumental in our ability to solve the pride flag theft from the courthouse earlier on last year. We've had many recent investigations, to include last night actually, where we had a stabbing in Old Town around 1st and W Street. The suspect left the scene. We knew in a white sedan. We knew enough about the car at the time. We could have put a white sedan into the Flock system and likely have gotten some hits in that immediate vicinity with a camera that was close. Short time later, though, by using surveillance, we were able to pull the picture of the camera off a surveillance camera. One of my officers recognized the suspect and the vehicle, and then we had a license plate. We could have put that license plate into the Flock system and likely would have gotten a hit on which way it left the city of Eureka, or at least the last known camera that it passed in the city of Eureka. Luckily for us, the driver was very unstable and crashed his car at Wiat and in a single vehicle collision and was taken into custody by the Sheriff's Department. But how much nicer would it have been to be able to tell the Sheriff's Department and focus our resources to search for this individual that had just stabbed somebody in the back, that they were last seen southbound on Highway 101 heading out of our jurisdiction. They could have then focused Fortune or Rio Dale. Everybody could have focused trying to find this vehicle on the way down there. So that's just one of many examples that we have of crimes that have been committed recently in Eureka that would have been very helpful to have this. Others that have come up recently, and you've seen them in the news, is some of the missing person reports that we've had, where we've had some family members really, the reason behind their being missing is kind of unknown to us. They were last seen. We have a vehicle. We may have found the vehicle. These cameras could help us track maybe where that vehicle was prior to them going missing or prior to us finding the vehicle, which may give the investigators more leads if there was foul play and a missing person report to follow up on. We are not the only agency in Humboldt County in talks with Flock. Blue Lake Rancheria just installed 6 cameras on the Rancheria. They gave 2 additional cameras to the Sheriff's Department that they purchased to use on Highway 299 to assist them with the ingress and egress from the Rancheria. As well as Cal Poly Humboldt, Fortuna Police Department, and Humboldt County DA's Office Retail Theft Task Force are also in talks with Flock to add this technology to their jurisdictions or to retail locations to help with that crime. This technology can be a real game changer in crime fighting and prevention in Humboldt County, as it's been in communities small and large across the state. So I would like to introduce members of the Flock team right now to do a short presentation just on what the cameras are and to reiterate some of the information I shared tonight. And then I'll be available to answer any questions about the policy If you review the policy, the additions to the policy are highlighted in bold. They were just additions that were either expansions upon the laws that are written in the policy already, just by spelling them out clearly of all the steps in the law, or adding some verbiage to address the concerns that was brought up by council. But it does mimic Santa Cruz's, that has a LPR program that is up and running, and like I said, was worked on with our IPA representatives. Both Julie and Teresa helped with that, Julie being the expert in that piece and able to help out and answer any questions that you have as well. So thank you.
I'd like to give an opportunity for the flock representative to share a report, if you have one.
Oz, that's Hector and Tariq.
Good evening. How's everyone doing? I'm going to go ahead. My name is Hector Soliman Valdez. I'm the Director of Community Affairs for Flock Safety. I am going to go ahead and share my screen. It seems that sharing is turned off, so if I can get access to that, I will.
Try it again. Go for it.
Thank you. I will go ahead. Excuse me. My apologies. Great. So as I mentioned, my name is Hector Soliman Valdez. I am the Director of Community Affairs here at Flock Safety. Wanted to start off by providing you all with a little bit of background on Flock. We are an Atlanta-based company that was founded in 2017 when our CEO and his neighbors were seeing a large uptick in crime in their neighborhood. And like many folks today, they had doorbell cameras as well as other video surveillance, and they went to law enforcement hoping that they could solve these issues. Unfortunately, what our CEO found out was that he needed an objective piece of evidence, which law enforcement let him know was a license plate. And also, as much as law enforcement wanted to solve these crimes without that type of information, they really were hamstrung, right? Both hamstrung because of officer shortages, because of lack of resources. And so getting that objective data was crucial in solving these type of crimes. And so he set out to do some research on license plate readers, and he found out several things. The first thing that he found was that license plate readers had been around for quite some time, since 2017 to be exact. 2017 is when we were founded, since the 1970s to be exact. And he also found that they were extremely expensive, right? And so communities would have to purchase a camera for tens of thousands of dollars and then maintain them. And again, he's looking for a solution that helps his neighborhood and helps local law enforcement. So that was a price point that just wasn't palatable. He also found out that many legacy providers sold data, license plate data, to third parties. Again, we're looking for a tool for his neighborhood to help law enforcement, and that was also something that wasn't palatable to him. And so that is where we got our start. We created our flagship product, which is what we're discussing today, which is license plate readers, as a software as a service type model, which has been really revolutionary in this field, where cities from many different sizes can implement license plate readers. We will take care of all of the maintenance. That means that city staff is able to focus on their respective duties. Law enforcement is able to focus on solving crime. We install and maintain the cameras for your department. And since our beginning in 2017, I'm proud to say that we are in over 5,000 communities today. We are actually helping solve 10% of reported crime in the United States. That actually equals out to something like over 2,200 crimes per week. So let's dive into the license plate readers, or what we've traditionally called our Falcons. Your department will be receiving images, such as what you see on the top right-hand corner, of the back of vehicles. They'll also receive license plate information and then the metadata associated with that vehicle. Is it a black Chevy in this case? Can they if there's multiple filters, they can search whether, there's a roof rack, bike rack, etc. As I mentioned before, we started off in our CEO's neighborhood. There's no facial recognition, no speed tracking associated with these cameras. This is, again, evidence for law enforcement. We do provide them in California. It's the California Stolen Vehicle System alerts. So that's alerts when there's a stolen vehicle entering Eureka, felony vehicle, etc. Or hot list alerts, or amber alerts and silver alerts. So missing children and missing elderly individuals. So really want to just talk a little bit about how we've built this system. As I mentioned before, Flock, many of the LPR providers sold data. All of your data will be owned by the city of Eureka. It will never be sold or shared by Flock. This means that your department is able to control access and who they share that information with completely. We also pioneered a 30-day retention period as our automatic default. That means that your department has enough time to investigate crime while protecting privacy and having that hard cutoff then, right? And so that's really helpful when folks may be out of town, for example, for a couple of weeks, or maybe it's a crime that they don't want to report right away. You want to give folks enough time to give that information to law enforcement, let them go in and investigate the crime while protecting privacy. There's no individual personal data in Flock, and that's really important to mention, right? So this is an investigative tool. It's a lead for your law enforcement department. We don't have DMV records or any of those type of information. Again, this is the beginning of an investigation for them. All of the data is end-to-end encrypted. And then we really strongly believe in transparency and accountability. There's a search reason and a number, required for every single search. That is stored indefinitely in an audit trail. I believe you all have your policy in place, and that will define kind of the accountability measures there. And then we offer a free transparency portal for your department. That transparency portal will look something like this. Any resident in Eureka will be able to go and see what that policy is, see who your department is sharing with, any successes, how many times they're searching the system, among other things. And that is updated daily for you all. Your department will be able to put that on social media, on the city's website, again, for any resident to take a look at. And so really want to mention, as I talked about earlier, we're in over 5,000 communities nationwide. In California, there's actually over 400 law enforcement agencies using Flock. That includes the city of San Francisco, Beverly Hills, San Diego, Oakland. Really almost every city in California now is using the Flock safety system. You're seeing, reports of long-term reduction in crime, as you see here in Vacaville, where they saw a decrease in crime year over year. But also just, diving into specific stories, and I'll keep it brief, but, I think I mentioned earlier, your department is able to receive hot list alerts and amber alerts and silver alerts. We're really proud and at Flock of helping in over 400 of those cases that we know of to date. And so that's something that is important to us. And so that being said, I'll stop right there. Happy to answer any questions on the technology or any other questions that you all may have.
Thank you. I would like to also give an opportunity for the independent police auditor group to comment if they would like.
Yes, thank you. I wanted to introduce my colleague Julie Rulin. If she can be unmuted and allowed to show video, she is also on the call. As the chief mentioned, we have worked with the jurisdictions in California to ensure that the ALPR programs that they are developing are aligned with state law, as well as best practices for use of this technology. We are happy to answer any questions related to what is being done throughout the state, as well as modifications to the policy. But the short story is that we provided some sample policies to your department that we found were aligned with both state law and with best practices, and the department took language from those and included it in their draft policy that's being presented to you this evening. So we think that to the extent that our role here is to really make sure that the ALPR program is implemented in a way that's legal and aligned with state law and standards. Julie, did you want to add anything?
No, that's great, Teresa. Hello, everyone. Yeah, we're happy to let this conversation develop and answer any questions that we can. Certainly appreciate the chief's explanation of how he thinks his department can benefit from this, and we also at the same time have an appreciation for some of the inherent risks and dangers associated with the privacy concerns. Like Teresa said, we have reviewed the policy as we have done in numerous other jurisdictions, and feel like this policy does a good job, does the job it needs to do to balance those concerns.
Okay. Thank you. I would like to just assess from the group. I know we've been meeting for almost 2 hours straight. Does anybody feel like we need a brief break, or should we just move on? Okay. Are we all good? Okay. Then let's continue. So I'll open this time up for the board to ask any questions about the automated license plate readers policy and what was presented. Board Member Torres.
Hector, I had a question. When you were showing your slideshow, there was that transparency page, and one of the options, it sounded like it said search audit history, and I was just curious what that was.
Yeah, so there is an ability for your department to put a search audit that is available to the public. That would, of course, redact users, specific users, and some information, but you'll be able to see, how many times folks are searching, et cetera. And it is a tool that some departments, or a feature that some departments do turn on.
Okay.
Thanks.
Board Member Giventer.
The chief mentioned that these are stationary devices. Exactly what does that mean, and where are they placed? How many are there?
Yeah, so I'll let the chief talk about the particulars in Eureka, but they are stationary devices that are infrastructure free. So they work off of solar power as well as the cellular network. And then we will install them either on flock poles or on city poles, depending on your needs, and then maintain them as well. And the chief can kind of talk a little bit about kind of his goals as far as placement. We do work with the department to create a deployment that matches the department's needs.
Yeah, so we worked with the flock team to come up with a plan to, I believe it was 23 cameras we had placed throughout the city of Eureka. Primarily focused on all ingress and egress points, but also to focus on some of our major arteries within the city that could help us with collecting data for crimes that are committed within the city that the vehicles don't leave the city. So not only looking at Highway 101 that bisects our city from north to south, which is a major thoroughfare for criminal activity to traverse the west coast, but also for those crimes that are being committed in our city, and then they're taking F Street out to Fairway out that way. So we think 23 cameras and the coverage that those cameras will provide to the city with the help of Flock's engineering team would be a good place to start for complete coverage of the city.
Exactly what is an ALPR alert?
So there are a couple different ways we can enter information into the system. One of them is a hot sheet or a hot list. So if we have a stolen vehicle, we can list it into the hot sheet for the APR system. Once we do that and that plate is seen by a camera, then our dispatch gets a notification that that vehicle just passed a certain location, was seen on that camera. And then they can dispatch officers to that location saying that that's the last known location of that vehicle. So they can start looking for that stolen vehicle as an example in that major or that immediate vicinity.
What is the time delay between the camera taking an image of the license plate, comparing it to the hot sheet, and that information being relayed to anybody?
When those hits come in, it's my understanding they're pretty real time. And what I've seen through other agencies that have used them, the sheriff's department gets a hit and calls us. They're like, it was 2 minutes ago that it passed that location. So you figure by the time they got the hit, saw it come up on their computer, made the phone call for us, we're 2 minutes out. So we know those vehicles are moving, right? What we're looking for is the direction of travel. And with more cameras, we can get more hits and then further track those vehicles that are wanted, more than just saying it's northbound from 101 into the city. Well, now it's past 4th and R. Now it's past, at Commercial and Broadway. We can kind of keep tracking that vehicle. So we're not just sending officers to a vicinity. We could be sending officers real time tracking the vehicle to get that exact location to make that stop.
Are there any ALPR cameras that are on portable masts that are moved from one place to another?
We currently do not have any, and I don't know if that technology is available. That'd be a question for Flock to answer if that's something they have the ability to do.
Are any ALPR cameras mounted in vehicles?
Not in the city of Eureka, sir.
Okay, thank you.
And to answer your question on the speed at which alerts are provided, it's within 20 to 60 seconds, depending on kind of the real-time situation. And then as far as there being mobile cameras, I think is what I understood the question. We do have a trailer solution. Of course, there's huge benefits of having a stationary system that provides that kind of real-time awareness throughout the city that an officer can rely on.
Any other board member Torres?
I was just curious, is this connected to the internet? If the internet goes down, does this go down with it, or is this cellular?
It's connected to the cellular network. We do, our technicians do verify which is the strongest provider in your area or at that specific location. And we do use FirstNet, which is a first responder only system.
Any other questions, comments? Yes, board member Pardoe.
I have one comment and 3 questions. Certainly the policy seems to address, I did a little research last night to state law. Obviously state law plays a big role in this policy, and it looks like the IPA, Flock, and the city have addressed that. Certainly the privacy concerns are a big issue. Also the reproductive and immigration concerns, and that's just not here. The city councils throughout California have all addressed that in their policies, and it seems like that's addressed in this policy. My questions, first question is, I read somewhere the ACLU said you should save it for 3 minutes. Here we say 30 days. I think the CHP said 60 days. So what's the thought behind the 30 days, saving it? Why not 3 minutes? Why not 60 days? Why not longer? Why did we decide 30 days, and what's that? And then I have 2 questions to follow.
Yeah, and I can speak on the just Flock's experience there. Our standard of retention is 30 days. There is no national standard of retention, right? So you do have some jurisdictions that are shorter, some that are longer than that. Our goal is to provide law enforcement with a tool that helps them solve the majority of crimes. And so we feel that the 30 days does that while protecting privacy, right? And so and the chief can kind of speak to kind of what the, labor constraints, et cetera, and kind of just how investigations work at your department. But there are many crimes that are not immediately reported, and that's why it's important for that investigative purpose to have at least some time for law enforcement to investigate.
And the IPA, I'd be interested in your input on that 30-day timeline.
Yeah, I think that, again, it's all about the balance, right? And how you make the most use of the technology while also limiting the potential downsides. And I think that while there may not be no national standard, 30 days does seem pretty standard. And again, just sort of taking into account how law enforcement intends to use this, cutting it shorter than 30 days really can limit the usefulness in some key investigative ways. And, 30 days, it feels like a reasonable limit on how long the technology is going to sort of live in a way that can be potentially violating people's privacy interests.
Thank you. And then this question is for the city manager. Obviously, there's going to be a cost to this system. What is that cost, and do we have the ability in our budget to be able to move forward with this at this time?
Yes, it's not currently budgeted, but we have mid-year coming up, and we would look for funds for that. We've also been in discussions with Lodging Alliance and other groups for some support, not only for these, but also for our lot cops that we have. And that's kind of pending. It is, I believe, 70,000 for the 76,000 for the first year. That includes installation, and then it's an annual payment of 60,000 that we to maintain them going forward, and that includes all maintenance. We won't be having our facility staff out there. Our facility staff typically deal with traffic issues, down lights, those type of things, pedestrian poles and stuff. That will not be a burden on any other staff. It'll be all Flock taking care of that.
Great. And then the last question, and maybe I don't remember the name of the cameras. Maybe you just mentioned, I think there's one at Carson Park right now. Obviously, we've invested in those. And how's the cost benefit been for those cameras? Have we seen the benefit that we anticipated with those cameras? And are we going to continue to use those cameras moving forward?
Yes, as a matter of fact, we modified. We had stationary cameras, and we were finding that those were getting vandalized often. The mobile ones don't tend to get vandalized. And we've definitely a perfect example. We have one in the parking lot here at City Hall. We've had folks drilling out our gas tanks because people didn't know the new gas tanks are made of plastic, and so there are folks out there stealing gas that way, and so it's pretty much stopped that from happening. So it's the similar. We had a lot of, after we just got done spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on Carson Parks and updating that, we had significant vandalism going on there, random vandalism for no purpose, and it has deterred that vandalism significantly.
So great. So we've seen success, and we anticipate similar success then with this system.
Yes.
Thank you.
I have two questions. One is regarding the policy in of itself, section 426.5. B, it says all ALPR data downloaded to the mobile workstation shall be accessible only through a login password protected system. I was just wondering if there could be someone in the room or in Zoom who could please elaborate, what is a mobile workstation? Is that a phone? Is that a laptop?
I can certainly help. That would be the MDTs or the computers in your squad cars. But Chief, you know the full spectrum of technology at your department. So.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it could be our MCTs in our vehicles. When we get those hits, they would come up. We'd have to confirm the license plate then. Those are going to have dual authentication shortly, just by state law we're required to do. It could be a computer workstation at the office where we have an evidence tech, or our forensic analyst would be searching plates depending on type of crime. So anywhere you could log in that would give access to the information on the cloud-based system, then you have to have an individual login to get on there. It's not one that just says EPD, whatever the password is. It's shared by everyone. It has to be an individual password and username for each individual to get on. That way, that's how the transparency piece works. That's how the tracking works in the audit. We know who logged on. We know who searched those items because they use a particular logon.
And I understand, too, that there needs to be some kind of documentation every time someone goes in and pulls data. I guess my comment is, given the history of what we've seen, how officers have responded, I'm a little bit concerned, to be honest with you, regarding this data, this information being on a mobile device. I could completely understand where this people accessing this information on a squad car or on a desktop where that computer is stationed in that location. But I've given some of the cases that we've reviewed, it seems like when information is taken information seems to be taken out of the department and in other locations. And I guess I'm just somewhat concerned about this data being available on a cell phone, basically.
So, I mean, I don't know that we'll have it on the phones because I don't know that it's needed on the phone to have an app, and I'm not even sure Flock can answer that's even a possibility. But from a mobile computer standpoint, I have access to more information than just a photograph of a back of a car on my mobile computer in there. I have access to your entire criminal history if I want it. So to think that we're taking literally a photograph, an image, there's no information obtained with that other than your license plate number and the color of your car and the type of car it is. But I don't get back it's a Motorola, a Honda Accord or whatever. I get a picture. For me to do anything else, I have to take that license plate number and put it in another system that I have to have a different level of access to get into to get any personal information. And all this stuff is audited across the board from Flock to DOJ. Every time I log a plate, run a plate, I have to run it through my number. And so if I take that image and it shows me taking that image and it shows me running that plate and I didn't have a legal reason to do that or a reason by policy, then all that's audited attached back to me because I have my own sign-in. So the amount of information I have access to on my phone right now with my entire computer system for our department, I can look up any report on my phone based on the types of systems we have. It's just there. That's the way it is across the board with technology. But we're talking about an image. And whether I can search that image on my phone or not, I honestly, it's irrelevant because I can call back to the headquarters and have somebody search it for me if I need it immediately.
I completely understand that it is just image, but at the same time, it is considered data, somebody else's information that could. I'm just worried that someone who has access to that is going to spread it in a location that's not necessarily in a secured location. And
I understand your concern.
And thank you for mentioning even the audit, because that was one of my other concerns too. Is that on section 426.6, it says that there's going to be an investigation commander or chief designee to ensure that an audit is conducted of ALPR detection browsing inquiries at least once during each calendar year. And given that audit is going to be performed every year, for me, that brings up a red flag, because even in our report that we saw earlier today, we saw an investigations log that was done prior to a year and of a situation that happened before a year. And if an audit is performed once during a calendar year, you're not going to have room for possible discipline or any corrective action with that. And so I'm just concerned that you're getting past that window, and I would suggest that an audit is performed more frequent than once a year.
So I would just say under POBAR, when we conduct an internal affairs investigation, and when that 1 year time frame kicks off is when the administration becomes aware of a potential violation. So if a violation happens in January and I do the audit in December, but I find that an officer acted potentially improperly in January, my clock doesn't start till December for that investigation because the administration was not aware of the violation until then. So if you make a complaint against an officer, I'm now aware of that. That's when my time starts. It doesn't matter how long back it went. It matters when we became aware of the issue. And again, that's kind of was, without going into that prior investigation, it was done. The investigation was done within a year. There was a loophole that was brought up by attorneys that put us outside that year about when the notification was. So if I do the audit in December, I find a violation anytime in the last 12 months of this policy, and I start an investigation, my 1 year time starts from December when I found the violation.
So it sounds like there's going to be an opportunity to possibly, for any corrective corrective action to occur from that point of that audit. And then do you feel like that'll give you enough information to look into this further? Because there's, we'll get into personnel as well. People come and go. Is that going to be enough time to, one, for people to remember to recollect that they went into this this portal to be able to state their case during an investigation? I'm just concerned that you're going to be left out from an opportunity to correct people's behaviors.
I understand what you're saying. All entries into this to make an inquiry has to be done with a case number, right? Or a CAD number, some reason, some legal reason. So that'll be something, if we have to investigate, to go back to start from a starting point to say, what was your legal reason in this investigation? Across the board, it is standard police practices with DOJ and everybody. It's annual audits. So when all our criminal history stuff that we do throughout the entire department, every license plate we run, every DL we check, that is audited once a year by DOJ. So it's standard practices once a year. I audit my property room once a year, and we take in 60, 70,000 pieces of property a year. And that's the standard practice across the board, is that if we find an issue, then we can go back and look at it.
But I'm just trying to see if there's a better practice to maybe performing, and a better practice for me would be performing an audit much sooner than just a year. But I still understand that it's still left up to the department to make that decision as well.
Well, I mean, we're looking for input from the board. So if that's, from the board completely and everybody agrees to that, we can look into that. I will say that, similar to other complaints, if there is a complaint about misuse of the ALPRs, it would not wait till that audit happened before we did anything about it. So if there's a citizen that is claiming that somebody is utilizing this nefariously and not following policy, that will go into that complaint process and be dealt with through the same processes that we do for other complaints. So it doesn't prohibit us from doing audits based on complaints or claims or whatever it may be. We can do it more frequently than that, but
now,
if that's what the board wants to recommend, we can look into that.
Is that wording specifically in our policy, or is that just standard citywide policy?
If we received a complaint, it would become a part of that investigation. Obviously, if somebody complained that this was used inappropriately, it would, in order to investigate it, we'd have to go look at the log and get an understanding of what happened. And so it would follow that same procedure.
Okay. Well, thank you. And me addressing to the board, I would just be curious to see, when I give you the opportunity to speak, what your thoughts are on that as well. Yes, board member Chair Bellini.
Thank you. Yeah, I have a few questions based around that comment. Thank you, sir, very much for the overview of your program also. And I also appreciate the council asking us for input on this before they make any final decisions. So first off, I think the benefit of having cameras and solving crimes and finding children and elderly people far outweigh the concerns of the officer's potential impropriety. Excuse me. But with that said, I'd be interested to know from the vendor here if what kinds of public privacy concerns have you encountered? Have you had to, address with other departments? Is it in terms of placement of the cameras or alleged shared information, officer misuse or access for personal use maybe, or any litigation that you've been involved in over your camera use?
Yeah, no, that's an excellent question. And I think many of the questions that are being asked today are the ones that we typically answer. Questions on around what is the right retention period for our community. As I mentioned before, really there's no national standard. Flock standard is quickly becoming the standard of the 30 days, right? That balance there. Then there's other questions on ensuring that protected, groups, or that the community members that maybe feel vulnerable are protected, which I think has been to some extent addressed in your it has been addressed, I should say, excuse me, in your policy stating California laws or California Values Act. And so I think that there's like typically policy questions, and making sure that the police use of the technology aligns with the fabric of the community or the values of the community. And so I do see your department engaging in that kind of work. And then potential misuse, right? And so again, ensuring that there is an audit in the tool. That's something that we've created, but then also that there's an audit process, and then which is also outlined in your policy. And then lastly, community engagement, right? And that's something that I think the fact that your committee exists or commission exists is really important, because this is one more opportunity for communities to engage, look at that policy before this is potentially implemented, right? And so it gives the public that opportunity. And then also just ensuring that there is a place long-term that this conversation can continue. The transparency can help with that, as well as just kind of community engagement as a regular part of what your department does, ensuring that they keep letting the community know how they're using this tool long-term. Those are questions that have come up as well.
Okay. So back to any litigation. Has your company been involved in any litigation over your cameras?
No, not that I'm aware of.
Okay. And then if I could ask the independent auditor, generally have these policies, since you said that you provided some policies that you felt were in compliance with California law and such, to the chief here in the development of his policy, have you, what's your opinion about how these policies have held up in any other California jurisdictions? That have there been, has this been litigated other places?
I can't speak specifically to litigation, but I can give a couple of examples of how these systems have been used in other parts of the country that raised some concerns, and how the policy here and in other places, other jurisdictions where we've been advising agencies have addressed these kinds of concerns in their policy. And one of those was around the Black Lives Matters protests in 2020. There were some jurisdictions that were sort of taking note of cars that came in or out of those into the area where the protests were happening. And there were, I think, you could have a debate about whether that, some of the law enforcement agencies were saying this was necessary to try to forestall some of the violence that was happening, the counter protests, all of that. And yet it's not. In some communities they say we don't want officers, we don't want law enforcement agencies tracking how people come and exercise their First Amendment rights. So this policy has a provision about using the camera system in a way that might impede or directly impact the exercise of First Amendment rights. So that's sort of one example that we saw. And I don't know about specific litigation, but that's just an example of one set of concerns.
Okay.
I can provide a second example. Again, happened outside of the state.
Please.
In some cases, there were some claims filed related to individuals who were stopped because the license plate potentially had a hit, and it was the same make and model, for example, but it was maybe one number off, and the officers stopped the vehicle, performed a high-risk vehicle stop for stolen vehicles, did not do the secondary verification that is required by California law and in these policies to determine that the vehicle was actually the vehicle that they intended to stop based on the hit off of that hot list. So again, similar to Julie's point related to First Amendment, this policy and state law requires that second level so that officers are not taking action simply based on the hot list hit. They're required to then do that secondary verification to ensure that the vehicle that they're stopping or that they're looking for is in fact the vehicle in question here.
Yeah, and to add a little bit of additional context to that kind of scenario, something that Flock does, that was a different system, is that we provide an alert if there is a low confidence. But again, it is always important. This is machine learning, and that's why it's important that it's in policy and in state law that there is a verification of what the alert is.
Okay, thank you. And actually, that is well articulated in the policy in a few places, reference to the government code and such, and the requirement of the officers to verify. So I totally have confidence in the protection of public privacy as written in the policy. Just a couple other questions for you, since you're on our screen, big screen there. Have you encountered a lot of vandalism or any vandalism or what you would expect in vandalism of your cameras?
It is not substantial nationwide. There are sometimes communities that have an issue. We'll try to work with the department to move those cameras. I will say our cameras are pretty high up, which is a deterrent in and of itself. It is not a widespread issue for Flock. We have thousands of cameras up nationwide, and so not a concern, not a typical concern.
Okay. Are they prominent? Are they noticeable as you drive by? You know, I think you showed a picture. They're black, so.
They're about the size of a football. They do have solar panels. I think if you know what you're looking for, you will know that that is a Flock camera. I see them every single day, and it's almost like a hobby for me because I talk about them every day. Other community members, if you're just driving, you may not notice, but we're definitely not hiding them per se.
Okay. Let's see. Thought I had another question here. Where are they mounted? Are they mounted on utility poles or what?
Yeah, that'll depend on the specific locations that we have decided upon with your department. They will either be on what we call a Flock pole. So we will put up a pole. We'll obviously do the permitting and everything associated with that, or we will use existing infrastructure. Really just depends on what is available.
We'll do our best to put it on existing infrastructure.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
All right. Good to know. All right. Well, those are all my questions, and I just want to say that, Chief, you have my full support of bringing this forward to the City Council, and I really hope it has a big impact on our city.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the board? Board Member Ladika.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I realize we're over time, so I'll try to truncate my concerns. It would be nice to have an annual report of the efficacy of these and critical times when they were really helpful for an investigation, just for those members of the public who are concerned about them, just to show how effective they are. Also included in that report would be helpful to have any unauthorized access or attempts to access in an unauthorized manner, or incidents where people accessed it, for inappropriate purposes. But my main question, and I don't know, this is probably a little outside of the realm of this board, but given the recent change in administration in Washington and priorities, it's probably something that hasn't come up yet, but what would Flock's, because the servers I'm assuming are in Atlanta or somewhere else, what would Flock's response be if it received a federal subpoena?
Yeah, so our contract with you states that your city is the owner of the data. If Flock were to receive any kind of subpoena, we would direct that subpoena to the city so that you can intervene if needed. So that's our default, and we do use AWS Government Cloud, so those are distributed throughout the country, not necessarily in Georgia.
Thank you.
And to answer your annual, what we would do is we would add this. We have a annual report for our flock. For our lot cops, and we would add this to that annual report as far as effectiveness, calls for service, those type of things.
Just for feedback again regarding the policy, could that also be, if the board is interested, could that be also included in this policy?
I don't recall if we could put it in the policy, but I believe that we have a general ordinance on cameras that we'd put it either in the policy or in that wherever the existing one is now. I don't know if we put it in the policy for the lock cops or if it was part of an ordinance.
I think the lock cops are in the city ordinance, but I definitely can put it as the last item in this for an annual report to be included, whether that's included in our annual report that we do to the community as a whole on the entire police department operations, or part of the lock cop surveillance system type annual report that we do. I will put that in as 426.10 to do an annual report.
Perfect. Thank you, Chief. Board Member Pardoe.
Just to follow up to Chairperson Novella's point, I think these flock cameras have a higher risk of privacy compromise, or these groups that are concerned about monitoring. I think a sooner audit, 6 months, might be appropriate, just given what we've heard today. And I don't think they're like the mobile cameras. I think there's a much higher risk of potential challenges with these flock cameras. And so I think given the community concerns, it sounds like the city manager and police chief have heard a lot of opinions. I think a sooner audit would be appropriate, just to make sure that we're not seeing any of these challenges or concerns happening here in our community.
Okay. Any other question, comment? Yes, Board Member Giventer.
Has the city council requested a recommendation from this board?
Just input. And so what this item here that's been agendized is to provide input. We've taken notes on this, and we bring that information back. Right now, it seems to me that the consensus for requested changes to go back to council would be to include an annual report on the cameras as a part of the policy, and then also to increase the frequency of audits from a year to 6 months.
Any other questions or yes, Board Member Chair Bellini.
Just another minor input. I think you got a couple questions about acronyms that are in the policy. I would just recommend that you spell them out. There's a lot of cop lingo in acronyms, some that I don't recognize. So
you should see what engineers
spell
do.
those out, or put them in the definitions, and like COPP. What does that mean?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions, suggestions, comments? All right. I would like to bring this up for public comment here in chamber. I see none. And is there anybody on Zoom who'd wish to comment on this agenda item?
I see no one on Zoom.
Okay. Thank you. I'll entertain a motion for this item.
Board Chair Novello, we do not need to vote on this.
Oh, perfect.
It's
Thank you.
just input from the board. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you for clarifying that. All right. So thank you for hearing our feedback, and thank you for including us in that. So the next
I
item,
apologize for the oversight. I think I've been dinged twice, once by Board Member Chair Bellini and Board Chair Novello. My apologies.
It's all right.
You have
Next item that we have on the agenda is board member reports. Does any board member have a report to make? Or
I do. I'm so sorry, Board Chair Novello. I do have a hand raised from Derek.
Okay. Yes, I'll go ahead. Derek, you have 3 minutes.
Yeah, so I am staff, but I'm commenting as a member of the public. I have 2 questions that I'm hoping Hector can answer, considering public comment has ended right after this comment. It's my understanding, well, you just said the data stored utilizing AWS. The PowerPoint says the data stored with end-to-end encryption, but E2EE, from my understanding, generally refers to the state of the data while in transit, not necessarily while it's being, stored on the servers. So to clarify, is the data stored on Amazon in an encrypted fashion which prevents Amazon itself from accessing the clear text data? And if so, are the decryption keys also stored on Amazon? And secondly, is it possible for Flock to lock down logins to the web portal to only be allowed from given IP addresses? So for example, preventing access to the system unless the accessor is located at EPD headquarters or is on the VPN.
Do you want me to answer that?
Derek, we can get.
They left. I was just so
Yeah.
Derek, if you'd like to put those questions in writing.
All right.
We could.
I can. I would love to be able to regurgitate what you said, and I can't. So we will need that in writing to get them to answer that.
All right, we'll do. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Now going back to board member reports. Does anybody have a report to report out, or any suggestions for future agenda items? Yes, board member given turn.
Speaking of meetings at a bar, last week I was at a bar, and I was assiduously reviewing the OIR report, and person next to me noted that my engagement in that report and asked, well, what was that report all about? And I had an opportunity to speak with a community member who happened to be a child psychologist with one of our school districts, and it was very informative about and very well received about the type of review and oversight that we were providing for the City of Eureka Police Department. Just a community reaction. I do have a question here that could be addressed perhaps by Chief Stevens and maybe by the OIR group. You are, of course, familiar with the RIPA Act, the Racial and Identity Profiling Act of 2015. It was passed by AB 953. It provides, as I understand it, that every time that there is an interaction, we'll call it a stop, between a police officer and a citizen, that approximately 20 data items need to be recorded regarding the nature of that stop. As the title of the act provides, it could be the race, gender, age, and all kinds of demographic information, including the location of the stop and the reason for the stop and so forth. My question to Chief Stevens is, how is this being received by members of the department? Well, after that, I have a second question.
Much like any requirement upon the police department, it's just another day. We conduct traffic stops, enforcement stops, encounters every single day. They know to fill out the information, but it does not affect how they go about doing their daily business. It's just another, like you said, roughly 20 questions, about 5 minutes of their time after every single stop that they have to do and complete. All of them have to be completed each month, and then all of those are reported back to DOJ each month, and then we get an annual report at the end of the year. So it has had no bearing on the operations of the police department.
What is the nature of the recording of these data? I understand that there are apps that are available on a cell phone that could be used by officers. Is there a standard app that the department recommends, or is this individual, or is it recorded on paper without the use of an app at all?
No, stop data in our agency is a part of our RIM system, so a part of our CAD reporting system. So we write our cases in there. All the people we contact are in there. You go to that person file after you complete a stop, and then on that person file, there's a particular button that says stop data. You hit that button, it prompts then stop data to open. You run through that set of questions that you have to answer. If you answer all those completely and you complete that form properly, when you close it out, it sends it off to be done. So it's all done and tracked within a computer. We can run audits and logs. We know who hasn't done it, when it needs to be done. We can cancel them if they were requested improperly, or we can add them later if it wasn't requested or wasn't added to the type of call it was. So it's all done within our CAD computerized reporting system.
Who in the department monitors that activity?
I have a sergeant that helps monitor, making sure that they're completed, then a commander that oversees the final report each month that goes to DOJ.
Do you think it's advisable, or is there a provision for the OIR group to review this data, particularly in comparison to comparable police departments, or perhaps in comparison to the Humboldt County Sheriff's Office?
I don't know how to answer that. If that is something the city or the IPA would like to take a look at, then by all means, take a look at our stats and our data.
So this could be an opportunity for a future agenda item. We do have the IPA as a part of their work scope to do audits, and similar to when we did the mental health calls audit, we could do something similar like that if that's the board's choice.
May I ask the IPA representatives, have you encountered these type of requests in any of your prior activities?
Yes, absolutely. And we have done audits of RIPA data for, I believe, 5 of the jurisdictions in which we work. They range in scope. Some of them are simply compliance audits to ensure that data is being accurately collected and reported to DOJ. Of course, that's a function that DOJ also does internally. They do their own compliance audits and checks. So it's a second level of checks and balances. We've also looked at the data itself to see if there are any disparities with relation to the types of stops, the individuals who are stopped relative to the population. I will say that the data statewide is inconclusive around that, and our audits have also shown that you know, there are a number of factors that could contribute to disparities. So you know, we've certainly done those audits. Whether or not they provide any conclusive or actionable information from the disparity side is yet to be seen.
Yeah, I
But
share
yes,
that.
we have done those.
I share that reaction. The 2024 RIPA data statewide has been released, and it's online, and it includes data items specifically for the Eureka Police Department and for Humboldt County Sheriff's Office. But aside from looking at the raw numbers, I can't make any assessment as to whether the respective departments are consistent or not.
And I would like to bring it up to the board to see, by show of hands, who would be interested if you would feel that it would be good to have this on a future agenda item. If you could please raise your hand.
Could I have just a little bit more clarity on what it is that we want to put on a future agenda?
Well, we'd like to see the summary RIPA data from the Eureka Police Department, not all the individual things, but just a summary table, and some basis of comparison of that data summary to certainly to Humboldt County sheriffs, maybe comparable police departments on a couple of them, and some assessment as to whether there's any potential concern that we should be aware of.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other board member reports? Or I would like to bring a potential agenda item. Is we had talked about it came up earlier today with board member Ladika regarding those mobile cameras that are positioned in different locations. I was wondering if the board is interested in maybe hearing a report to see how those cameras are working and how that's going. So if you're interested in hearing about that, maybe you could, I would like to take a poll from the board to see if you're interested in hearing that. Maybe raise your hand.
Are you talking about the lot cops?
Yeah, the lock.
So, if it's okay with the board, we do that annually as a part of the city council. So when we prepare that, we can bring it to you guys prior to taking it to them.
Okay. Yeah, that would be good. Any other board report or suggestion for a future agenda item? No? Okay. Next agenda. How about we just move through these real quick and then we'll adjourn. Police chief reports. There's a staffing update.
So currently on patrol in the Eureka Police Department, we have 4 vacancies. I have 3 recruits in the current police academy that's scheduled to graduate in June or July. I have a 4th that may go back into Mod 1, which is the last mod of the academy. This recruit suffered an injury during the academy, which prohibited their ability to conduct some of the physical fitness testing, which resulted in them not being able to pass the test at the end. However, they were ranked one of the top cadets. So as long as that employee can show that they can pass that physical fitness test and they've regained the strength they need to do that, then potentially we'll be graduating for come late June. I hired a lateral Parks and Waterfront Ranger who was a reserve for EPD, so he was already working with us from a reserve capacity, worked for us 20 years ago. Hired him back full-time as a new Parks and Waterfront Ranger, so now we have 7-day-a-week coverage on the waterfront trail and in our parks throughout the city, which has been a huge help already, and we've seen some positive impacts on that. I promoted a officer and reinstated the Old Town officer position January 6th, so that is huge. The city is broken down into 3 beats. Beat 1, which includes the Old Town area. That Old Town beat within that area combines for 51% of calls for service for that beat. So having an officer down there 4 days a week, plus special events that can address preemptively some of the issues down there and some of the concerns with CSET has been it's had a huge impact already, and we're looking forward to meeting with the Eureka Main Street at their mixer next month and introducing him to all the business owners down there. Currently, like I said, we have 2 officers on the field training program that graduated at the academy in December. They're expected to get off the program in April. We're still on 12.5-hour watches throughout the year. My goal was to staff all these watches heavy. So as people graduate the academy and get off the program, we're going to put them onto these watches. This will help with employee burnout. We'll give an opportunity for employees to take vacation without us having to fill with overtime and backfill those positions. My goal is to cut overtime for the last 4 months of the year. And then, again, to further address the burnout, we will look at a new schedule in 2026 that hopefully we'll have the staffing for that will allow us to include the training hours we need to meet all the mandates we have in the state of California for meet training and all our internal training requirements that we have without having to use overtime for that. So we're currently working on that with the city and actively recruiting for those positions to get to there where we need to be. Dispatch, we have 3 vacancies. I have 2 in backgrounds. If that one employee goes back into the academy for Mod 4, she is a dispatcher for us now. So I'll have 4 vacancies that I'll have to fill. So we're currently doing interviews next week to try to get more people in the backgrounds for that position. And then I have 1 CSO vacancy, have 1 in backgrounds for that. And then animal control officer was hired. She started on Monday. However, she is in the middle or will be in a 12-week training program to make sure that we can ensure her success in that position, which is a very difficult position. I kind of explained to her the other day, it's part officer, part CSO, part everything. So I need to stair-step her training program with different pieces and get her up to speed to a point to where I can make sure she's successful in that. But I have no doubt that she will be. She's bright and she wants to be a future officer with EPD, so I'm going to do the best I can to take care of her and be able to move her into a position in the future. And then our records is fully staffed. So we hired, promoted one of our dispatchers to records technician, which was the 4th position we have. So for the first time in a while now, our records office is fully staffed. So that's good news. For staffing, that's all I have. I do want to touch on it'll be super quick because I'm just excited about actually being able to do it. But I talked, I think, in front of this COP board about NIBRS, which is the National Crime Reporting System that went into effect in 2021. Everybody had to be there by 2022. We went in November of 2022. So we now have 2 years. We have 2023 stats and 2024 stats all entered into the same system. So comparisons now can be made with common reporting compared to trying to compare it to the UCR reports, which wasn't right. So if you remember, there were some reports that came out online saying, Eureka had the worst crime rate in the state of California. We saw, like if you look at the report between 22 and 23, a 582% increase in crimes per person, 400% in crimes against property. That just wasn't fair because you're not comparing apples and apples, you're comparing apples and oranges. So now that we actually have 2 years to compare, we've seen a 1.83% increase in crimes against persons, which is only 16 reports taken difference between 23 and 24. We've actually seen 11.5% decrease in crimes against property and a 6.5% decrease against crimes against society. So we actually have a comparison, and this is kind of what I talked about during that last meeting too. You look at the 10 years of UCR prior to going to NIBRS, crime is flatlined in Eureka. It pretty much stays consistent within a few calls for service, and we're seeing that trend continue between 2023 and 24 with some decreases in certain areas, even though we're reporting out on a whole lot more crimes now. So because I had spoke about that in the past, I just wanted to bring up that we can actually show a little bit more of that. I'll put these into our annual report, which we're going to give to council the second meeting in February, and I'll bring back to you in the meeting in March, our entire department annual report, but it will include these stats for further analysis. So unless there's any questions, I appreciate your time tonight.
Perfect. Thank you, Chief. Any questions from the board to Chief Stevens? I see none. City Manager Slattery, staff reports.
I'm going to be here for at least a half an hour, so get ready. No, just joking. All I want to do, I really want to thank the chief, the command staff, and all of EPD. I think that staffing report a year ago compared to what it is now is a significant difference, and it really demonstrates the support of our elected officials to EPD and the leadership at EPD for the morale and the retention, not only the recruitment, but the retention has significantly increased, and I just want to thank the chief and all of the EPD staff for making that happen.
There's an item for the critical incident board review.
Yeah, I should probably pay attention to that. It's been a long day. So we had discussed that of selecting a board member for that process, and so it would be great if somebody would like to nominate somebody, or somebody would nominate themselves to be a part of that.
Is there anybody in the board interested in being part of this critical incident review board?
It's not at a bar. It's not at a bar. Board member Giventer.
I'll nominate Lawrence Giventer.
I hear a nomination. Do I hear a second? All right, we'll make it official. All those in favor of appointing board member Giventer to the critical incident board review, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anybody oppose? No? All right. Well, thank you so much for everyone for joining us. Thank you. I know we were running a little long today, but I appreciate for your patience. And so thank you. Our next the COPP meeting will be on Tuesday, April 22nd at 3:30. I hope you have a good night. Or March. What is? Did I say the right date? March. I think you did. March 22nd.
22nd.
March 22nd. Thank you at 3:30. Thank you for catching that. All right. Have a good night.